Discussion around skill and talent, specifically the perceived lack of it within the K-pop industry, has been a topic of discussion since K-pop was created. The existence of fan wars dating back to the days of HOT and Sexies is proof enough that fans of the genre have always been critical of the performance ability that idols and prospective idols possess. And as K-pop has become more popular, these discussions have become more widespread and have arguably gotten even more severe and ruthless, meaning that no idol is safe from criticism and hate on their skills. You would think that entertainment companies would take note of this fan culture and would respond to it by giving their idols and trainees more proper training for their vocals, dancing, and rapping. But instead, as the years have gone by, and especially since the beginning of 4th Gen, there's been an extreme amount of outrage around an apparent decline of skill from the pool of active idols. It seems like every other day, footage of encore stages, MR removed, or dance practices go viral because of the mistakes that the idols captured make, and a lot of K-pop fans even say that these idols don't deserve their careers because they make too many mistakes, or simply don't meet the expectations that people have of them. You would think that this sort of common belief that idols should be above average when it comes to performance skills would transfer over when it comes to fan votes in survival shows like the Produce or Island series, but that historically has not necessarily been the case. For those unaware, survival shows are televised competitions within the K-pop industry where contestants prepare performances in order to win votes from viewers at home, and the most voted contestants at the end of the show form a new K-pop group. Some notable survival show groups are Twice, who were formed through 16, and Hyphen, who were formed on Island, and the group we'll be focusing on today is IZ*ONE, who were formed on the third installment of the Produce series, Produce 48. Now, IZ*ONE were actually known for being one of the more talented survival show groups, with amazing vocalists in Jo Yuri, Kwon Eunbi, Kim Chaewon, and more, Choi Yena handling most of the group's rapping while also being a good singer, and the entire group more or less being competent as dancers. The average skill level of this group was well above a majority of their peers. So unfortunately, when it came to the one member who was on a noticeably lower skill level than the rest of the group, she majorly stood out and kind of built a unique reputation because of this. If you couldn't tell by the title of this video, that member was the one and only Kang Hye-won. Now, I need to specify that this is not a hate video against Hye-won. She was honestly one of my favorites within IZ*ONE, and I feel like the rest of this video is going to be more so positive about her than negative, and Hye-won is also kind of just being used as an example to talk about K-pop fan culture surrounding survival shows, and how fan culture on what trainees or idols people choose to support has shifted over the past few years. Because people don't really seem to like the same kind of contestants that they did back in 2018. And yeah, I honestly think that Hye-won is gonna be the last of her kind when it comes to winning survival show contestants, at least for a while. Now, I know a lot of you are probably aware of Hye-won and her sort of archetype when it comes to survival shows, and I don't want to be redundant in my commentary, but it's been literally 6 years since Produce 48. Side note, does anybody else feel old now? And I think it's important that we talk about Hye-won's story during the show and why she was so loved, despite her obvious lack of experience. From the first episode, the editing and words of the judges in Produce 48 made it very clear that Hye-won was not the most capable performer. Being very timid in her audition performance and having a retrospectively iconic deer in the headlights expression, she was immediately given an F rank, while a majority of the eventual IZ*ONE members were given A, B, or C ranks at the least. But the important thing to note here is that her shortcomings were not her defining characteristics on the show. Rather, Hye-won quickly became known for her positive attitude and determination to improve and put in as much effort as possible. During the show's first group mission, Hye-won and her teammates were tasked with preparing a performance to Blackpink's Boombayah, and the practice period for this performance was, well, rocky to say the least. Her groupmates were Han Cho-won, Asai Nanami, Chiba Eri, Sato Minami, and Asai Yuka. And this team consisted of the quote-unquote leftovers, the girls who weren't picked by any of the leaders of the other teams and were put together basically by default. So obviously the morale of this team was somewhat low. Coupled with the fact that they were chosen to perform Boombayah, an extremely rap-heavy track with the team consisting of mostly non-fluent Korean speakers, and a vocally intense song with only one notable vocalist, many of the girls on this team seemed to have already given up. But not Hye-won. No, she was the leader of this group, doing her best to motivate each of her teammates and doing everything she could to make her team do their best, even if the end result wasn't all that. Well, what matters is that they all tried their hardest, and Hye-won got to be the star in this moment because she was able to show the best parts of her personality and basically have the audience fall in love with her. Throughout the rest of the show, her storyline was one of real growth and determination, and she primarily took on rapping parts in all of her later performances and got semi-decent at it by the end of the show, earning her 8th place, allegedly, in the final vote and a spot in IZ*ONE. Overall, a pretty standard storyline, especially in a reality competition show. However, I do firmly believe that we won't be seeing anything similar anytime soon. Although this is such a common and honestly amazing sort of plotline to see in reality TV, I think the only reason that idols like Haewon or IOI's Sohye or 101's Gwanlin were as well loved as they were was because of the atmosphere of the K-pop industry and online K-pop fan spaces at the time. See, during 3rd and early 4th gen, one of the most common phenomena seen in K-pop was groups from smaller companies, real underdogs, rising to stardom. Think Momoland, 17, EXID, BTS. Hey, remember when BTS and 17 were underrated? Anyways, see, during this era, people loved seeing groups come from next to nothing and end up becoming huge stars through hard work and a little bit of luck. Even in 4th gen, we've seen the likes of STAYC, The Boys, Luna, etc. really earn their spot in the forefront of K-pop, and I think the fact that so many fans at the time were so willing to support groups whose success was uncertain really translated to survival show voting too. Underdog stories were kind of trendy. Most people liked rooting for contestants who had the odds stacked against them, and therefore K-pop fan culture sort of adapted to actually make it possible for those at the bottom to rise to the top. Even within popular groups, this was back in the day when if you were known as the quote-unquote underrated member having the least amount of lines in your group's discography, you'd have people crying out that you deserved better. Think Twice's Momo, Red Velvet's Yeri, NCT's WinWin, you get the gist. At the time, being underrated was almost an easy way to gain support if people thought you deserved better and you had a good personality and work ethic, which is why Haewon was so massively rallied behind during Produce 48. But I think fan culture has changed, and I think it's changed to the point where people expect perfection right out of the gate when it comes to debuting groups and even survival show contestants. So nowadays, it feels like no one wants to allow people within the idol industry to have the opportunity to grow. I don't know about the rest of you, but I don't particularly like this either. Let's take the most obvious example of a rookie group who has faced a lot of backlash for their talent and talk a little bit about Islet. Islet were formed through the Hybe survival show Are You Next, and recently debuted with their 5-member lineup of Wonhee, Mocha, Minju, Iroha, and Yuna. But to say their debut year has gone smoothly for the group in terms of online reception would be ignorant at best. Despite the fact that these girls were edited very positively in Are You Next, receiving large amounts of praise from the judges and other contestants on the show, after debuting, the group has faced massive amounts of hate for their vocal abilities that have been showcased through encore performances and MR removed videos. And these girls have overall been branded as one of the least talented rookie groups around right now. People are saying that these girls stole opportunities from the quote-unquote better Are You Next contestants, that they debuted too early and that the girls need more training before they seriously enter the idol industry. And Islet aren't the only ones facing this type of criticism. Even groups that have a reputation for being talented have received hate online for having weak encore stages or performances, such as Rise and Kiss of Life. And if these two groups can get hate for their vocals, that's just proof that K-pop fans now are more sensitive than ever. I mean, these groups have proven themselves to be more than talented over and over again, and just one bad moment made thousands of people turn against them. So, I mean, how can you say that K-pop fans are happy with anything less than perfection nowadays? The survival show that really inspired me to start talking about this was Island 2, which I recently did a whole video talking about the riggery within that show. And the biggest problem I had with Island 2 is that there was no real underdog story that got a happy resolution. The girls that were shown to be good in the beginning were the girls who avoided elimination each time, and the final lineup consisted of girls who were ranked in the top half of the contestants from episode 1. Because of this lack of change within the top-ranking contestants, the entire show just ended up feeling bland and honestly, not really worth my time. Because how can the end of a show be satisfying if you know what's gonna happen from episode 1? Haewon was one of the main characters of Produce 48 because she was the main underdog who clawed her way to the top. But because of judges' critiques and online criticism, you never really knew if she was actually gonna make it to the end. Still, she was insanely loved because of her charm and ended up as a vital component of IZ*ONE because of her popularity, and I genuinely think the show would have been missing out if they chose not to cast her. But still, despite the fact that survival shows are way less rigged than they used to be, I don't think K-pop fans will ever be able to have another Haewon. Because idols and survival show contestants are crucified for making small mistakes, even if they only happen once, how will we ever see a contestant who's a genuine underdog who struggles in the beginning succeed and win votes? I honestly think we won't. Not until K-pop fans drift away from their obsession with perfection. You might say that cases like Wonhee or Mocha in Are You Next, or even like Bahie and Kepler are similar cases to Haewon, but I would have to strongly disagree with those statements. Wonhee and Mocha were heavily favored by the judges and the show's editing, and they overall did a really good job of showing all of the debut girls at their best while hiding any of the flaws within their performances. Meanwhile, Bahie was honestly capable from the start and was never actually a bad performer. She was just almost non-existent in the show's edit, and she kind of seemed like an underdog because of that. Realistically, there hasn't been an actual underdog story that felt truly realized in any survival show since Haewon. And in order to bring back #real television, we as K-pop fans need to start addressing what's keeping us from getting that. I mean, like, come on guys, we gotta stop obsessing over encore stages and MR removed. MR removed videos are honestly inaccurate because of the filters they use to get those vocals, and encore stages are recorded at the end of long and busy days for whoever ends up performing, so of course they aren't going to sound their best. We need to start focusing on the good performances instead of the bad, and this isn't to say we should start pretending pre-recorded vocals are live or anything like that, but instead we should try and realize that if an idol has sang live well in the past, then that probably means that when they didn't perform as well in a different instance, they were probably just having an off day or something. It's not realistic to expect perfection from idols because they're people, like humans who make mistakes and humans who aren't always at their best. I mean, Wonhee trained for less than a year before she went on Are You Next, so of course she's not going to be perfect. You can criticize, sure, that's all fair I guess, but let's set our expectations at a bit more of a reasonable spot. I know many of you miss the days of Mamamoo or Girls' Generation or BTOB when there were dozens and dozens of phenomenal singers in the industry. But let's not forget that 1. Most of these great singers had at least a few years of training under their belts, while now idols are lucky to get 2. And secondly, a lot of groups back then had members who were noticeably worse than the rest too. They just had others to cover them. But I'm not going to list any examples. If you know what I'm talking about, you know what I mean. At the end of the day, I just really hate seeing these new groups and contestants on survival shows get so much hate when realistically, they're all just people chasing their dreams. I feel like K-pop stans and people in general recently just lack a sense of empathy, and I think the world would be so much better if people genuinely worked on practicing it, because empathy is a skill, and it's an important one to have. I always root for underdogs in survival shows because I relate to them. I'm not the most talented guy in the world, but I have dreams and I have aspirations, and I would love to reach them someday, even if the odds are stacked against me. And I feel like a lot of K-pop fans are right there with me, but instead of supporting idols they see themselves in, they instead hate them because their insecurity gets the best of them. And I don't blame K-pop stans for that, it's understandable. But it is also wrong. I don't know, maybe I'll just need to go to therapy. I don't really know how to end this video. I feel like there isn't a good way to transition into a closing section, but that's all I really have to say, so I hope you enjoyed. As always, if you did like it, I would love if you left a like down below or a comment because I love hearing from all of you, and if you want to support me even more, consider clicking the join button down below and becoming a member. Doing so not only helps me in more ways than you can imagine, but it also gives you access to perks such as member-only videos, early access to new videos, and access to my Discord server where we're building a little community. So if you want to get to know me more or want more content, you know what to do. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you all in the next video. Peace out.